Thank y'all. Good evening. My name is Blair Thomas, and again, I'm a proud Army veteran. And it's an honor to be with you to celebrate the United States Army's birthday. Now, you don't know it. It's not today. It was yesterday. And what else was yesterday? Flag Day. Now, when I teach at Dallas Christian College, my first class with all the students, I let them know something. Because we're talking about birthdays, right? I let them know when I was born. And I share with them, I was born before Google. And of course, their eyes go really big. But most of you would understand when I say, I was born when black and white TV, rabbit ears, and tinfoil, where I was the remote control for my parents. And do you remember party line communication? Yes. Please hang up so I can call. But we're here to celebrate the birthday of the United States Army. And I have a question. Do you really know how old the Army is? And we're here to celebrate a birthday, but we're also here to talk about legacy. Legacy is about remembering how the Army began, why it began, and the men and women that carried it over multiple generations. So, without further ado, making sure the technology is working. Yes, the United States Army is actually 1 year older than the United States of America. We're celebrating 251 years. Now, let's pause to reflect on this. Why would somebody create an army before you had a country? Before you had a piece of paper or to be a country? Why would that happen? Because our founding fathers understood that freedom worthy is freedom to be worthy to be defended. Right off the bat. They didn't have a constitution. They didn't have a recognized government. And they didn't know if they would succeed. Can you imagine? Militia, farmers, silversmith, horseshoes, whatever it may be, their trade, coming together saying, this is worthwhile. What a conviction they had to have to form the Army at that time. The commitment and the faith. Faith in God. Faith in one another, because that's a critical piece in the Army, as well as faith that liberty was worth the sacrifice. The first Army was not polished. It was not supplied. It was not fully trained. By modern standards, they could not stand a GI, or for those that don't know what GI, general inspection. They could not pass that. But they had purpose. They had something so much more in that purpose. And that purpose carried them through the moments that could have broken them. One of the greatest examples of coming during the winter of 1777, Valley Forge. George Washington and his soldiers had many setbacks, brutal setbacks in New York, Philadelphia. Supplies were limited. Many members of Congress were giving up. And they didn't understand, could this army really defend what we were hoping for, what we were writing about? Some believed the revolution depended solely on the collapse or success of the army. But Washington refused to give up. He understood something larger than statistics, larger than supplies, larger than training. He understood if they survived, their dream of independence would survive. The winter tested them, the human spirit. Imagine, again, these are farmers, these are militiamen, these are seamen, these are people coming together, men and women. Soldiers built crude huts with frozen hands. Most of them didn't have boots or shoes. They had wrapped up cloths and blankets on their feet. They endured hunger, sickness, and exhaustion. They helped bury their friends, all during. But during that same winter, Baron Frederick von Steuben arrived at Valley Forge. A former Prussian officer, He began training the soldiers with discipline and consistency. He taught them to fight together, to work together, to function as an army. And what emerged from Valley Forge was not just a force capable of winning a war, but capable of executing plans, capable of doing what the country needed. 11,000 soldiers marched into Valley Forge. They were exhausted, they were hungry, and they were uncertain if they would survive. Many lacked the proper clothing and the training, and disease spread, and of course morale was low. Yet they stayed. They stayed because of their purpose. No great battle was fought at Valley Forge. No dramatic military victory. But something far more important took place. The struggling collection of militia, farmers, seamen, ladies, men. They trained, they endured, they learned, and they grew stronger together. And they came out on the other side because they refused to quit. And every one of us in here has our own little story where we had to learn not to quit, right? We had to learn when it got hard and what it meant to us. Every soldier, every armed forces member has learned that program. Because quitting is not acceptable for the person next to us. You talk to a soldier, they're fighting for the person to my right and to my left. Not a politician, not anywhere. So they came back and they were ready for the idea. They were fighting for an idea of freedom. A willingness to endure hardship together. And that generation after generation, that spirit continues today. How many served in our military? All of us learned that, didn't we? Generation to generation, what we served, why we served. We heard the stories. Through the Civil War, as you see back there with our Kentucky long rifle, starting at the Revolutionary, then our Civil War, of course, World War I, World War II. They learned in World War I, World War II, that they had to work together to preserve what our country fought for, what our ideals were. And remember, that's just an idea, and it's an idea still today. Every generation has to fight for that idea or decide, is it worth or not? I think mostly nowhere more visible was this than in 1944, June 6, at D-Day. Well, there we go. For months, Allied forces prepared. 160,000 plus soldiers crossed the English Channel, and they didn't know if they would return. They didn't know what was going to happen. Weather conditions were dangerous. German defenses were refortified. Secrecy was so critical. And early morning darkness, paratroopers, just like that 82nd Airborne, stepped out of airplanes, dropping behind enemy lines. Soldiers in landing crafts approached beaches in Normandy. Those beaches' names we'll know in history forever. Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. We understand what they meant, but Omaha Beach was probably the most expensive, most resistant, devastating machine gun fire on landing crafts, soldiers so heavily down that they drowned before they could even get to the beach. Yet they continued to come. Yet they didn't stop. How is it these men, these women decide to continue to step? It's because of their training, but it's also because of that commitment of purpose. It's that commitment to understand a small act can make a difference in someone's life. And how many small acts took place right there at Omaha Beach? Medics performing surgical and medical procedures right there under fire. Seeing their buddies, officers trying to rally. My goodness, soldiers climbing cliffs. History often remembers battles through maps and strategies, but D-Day ultimately won through individual courage. Individual soldiers. Individuals willing to fight for themselves. One soldier at a time, one decision, one step forward. And here's the thing. They were young, barely out of high school, and they decided to move forward. They trusted the noise, the fear, the confusion, the uncertainty. You remember where you were out of high school? How you were? I couldn't imagine. And it wasn't because they were fearless. It wasn't because the odds looked good. It wasn't because the situation was easy. It was because in the military, especially the Army, we fight for one another. This is the greatest military operation even to date is D-Day. And those men made it happen. Sons, husbands, fathers, brothers. And we didn't know who was coming home. But extraordinary burdens, extraordinary opportunities. Now, that brings us to a very important part of the Army, a place that I hope you've been to. At Arlington National Cemetery, a soldier stands watch over a tomb, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in any kind of weather. Rain, snow, heat, no matter what. If you've ever watched the tomb guard working his beat, working his post, it's not just the ceremony, it's a part of the sacrifice. That no sacrifice is everything is worth it. Every sacrifice. No name, no hometown, no family to come claim them. Now I want you to know who's been to the tomb. Awesome. I have a very good friend that's a tomb guard. He couldn't be here tonight. But I want to make sure you understand what's happening here. The tomb is a very important part of the Army. Very important part of the services overall. The center, of course, is the original. It's the original when they brought back World War I. Now, before it got its raise, it was low. Why did they even create the tomb guards? Does anybody know, possibly? Because a soldier going to visit the tomb of the unknown soldier back then walked up and there was a family having a lunch on top of the tomb when it was at ground level. That's why they raised it. And that's why they posted a guard. Believe it or not, back then you could walk right across the Potomac and knock on the White House, and that's what he did, demanding a guard be posted at the tomb of the unknown soldier. And that's how started the tomb. You have 3 crypts in front of it. Does anybody know what those are? We've got World War I. Thank you. World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Now, the tomb of the unknown soldier, known only to God, the Vietnam was discovered through DNA that we had the correct pilot and his body was exhumed. So we have no one in the Vietnam crypt. But the other 3 are full. The other 3 are sacred. The other 3, it's honor, it's discipline, it's commitment, pride. That's what the tomb stands for. That's why the ceremony goes on. That's why people visiting put up flowers, wreaths. That same spirit has carried soldiers through generation after generation. Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, uniforms represented back, Iraq, Afghanistan, and every mission in between. Different uniforms, different equipment, different battlefields, but the same commitment continues. The same purpose continues. Honor, discipline, commitment, and to serve. Now, you talk to any veteran, service changes you. Would you agree? My veterans? It changes you. It teaches us discipline. But it also teaches us sacrifice, resilience. It teaches us humility. Because the moments in military service where we come and train, and we're training for life conditions, but our own strength just simply isn't enough. That moment when training prepares, but it doesn't sustain. That moment we realize why we have a buddy, a battle buddy, why we communicate, why we talk. There's something deeper that takes over. Faith in the person that stands beside you. Faith in the mission ahead, and faith in God above. That kind of faith has always been a part of the army. It reminds me of the powerful moments of David and Goliath. By any military standards, David had no chance, no weapons, just a shepherd. But yet he went boldly, because of his faith in God, to go to somebody almost 9 feet tall, full armor, an armor bearer, a spear 10 feet long. But David comes against you in the name of the Lord, and he stepped forward. It's the same thing that happened at Valley Forge, that faith. The same thing that took place in Normandy and any foxhole that has been since. We say in the Army there's no atheists in a foxhole, right? There's no atheists. Because we all, whether it's king of battle, artillery coming down, or firing weapons, we have a faith in something more. And we reach out to him. Scripture tells us, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, for the Lord your God goes with you. For generations, those words have carried men and women through moments that they could not imagine. What an opportunity. Tonight, while we honor soldiers, we also honor another group that sacrifices, but they're overlooked. And it's important that we identify them. But no one serves alone. Behind every soldier there is family that serves beside them, spouses who carry on life while we're deployed, children who go without birthdays, holidays, first-time dances, school events and milestones in life, parents that have sleepless nights praying for those that are serving, those Blue Star families. And families that move duty station to duty station. I mean, the average service member moves every other year. Imagine a 20-year career, that's 10 moves at least. And then who knows about deployments, and then mama wants to go live with parents because it's going to be easier with their help, and there's another move. But families struggle, families go through, and then families are there at the end. They haven't worn a uniform, but families have served. And I think every veteran in here can state that and support that statement. Now, some of us come back carrying memories, injuries, grief, and struggles. Families become our steady home, our place to rediscover our purpose once the uniform comes off. Because we lose our purpose. We lose our rank. We lose our community. And it feels lonely. Home is the only place, but that's the love we need. A strong home. The Army changes, but the characters of soldiers remain remarkably consistent. Soldiers take care of one another. We complain about the weather. We complain about mud sleeping in or anything, but we still survive on terrible coffee and dark humor, don't we? Would y'all agree with that one? And still somehow we carry enough gear to survive except a comfortable night's sleep. I will never sleep on another air mattress as long as I live. Because they didn't have them back in my day. Despite all the advantages of technology, somehow the Army can still take a 10-minute task all afternoon. They were good at that. Cleaning weapons, right? Your first time ever cleaning, stripping, and going back and getting it checked? All afternoon. There's no 20-minute clean. It's impossible. But apparently, it's tradition. Apparently, underneath all the humor was something serious. The Army has endured 251 years because generations of Americans continue to serve, to continue answering the call throughout history. The call that reached Americans from the backgrounds, farmers, teachers, factory workers, immigrants, students, and little and big town city kids. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. During the Civil War, soldiers marched and fought in conditions that were just impossible. Brother fought against brother, entire communities against one another, and yet soldiers on both sides endured. World War I, troops entered the trench warfare. Unbelievable. Artillery, disease, exhaustion were realities for them. And then World War II, millions answered the call to defend freedom in Europe and Pacific. Korea, soldiers fought through freezing winters and brutal combat conditions. Vietnam, many served courageously through the most difficult times and divisive times in America. Especially not only going over there and serving, but then when they came back, they felt like they were still in a war. They were in the war with their own American citizens. And years after September 11th, another generation stepped up. Another generation deployed, spent birthdays, anniversaries separated from the families they love. The willingness of the soldier to stand with one another and for a nation and an idea is a part of the service. Men and women place service above self. I will stand, I will serve, I will defend. That matters, especially in a world where commitment often tends to be temporary. A handshake doesn't mean what a handshake meant back when I was young, back when I was told what a handshake stood for. Army still reminds us duty still matters, honor, service, and faith do too. Perhaps we need these values more than ever because freedom is not self-sustaining. Every generation has to decide what they're willing to give up for their comfort. And that's challenging. It's challenging that we have to teach every generation. But they need to decide whether it's a blessing for what they inherited for this country as they grow up. Every generation must decide. And after 251 years, soldiers of the United States Army have answered the question again and again and again. Now, tonight we remember those who served in wartime. We remember those who come home. Remember those that are carrying visible and invisible injuries. We remember the leaders that shaped lives, seasoned sergeants that carried responsibility, and of course that young private's first ever formation, stand on the yellow steps. Stand up straight. Salute correctly. Loyalty, duty and respect, self-service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. They're not just words. They mean something to a veteran. They mean something to a service member. They mean something to the United States Army. It still matters today. Now, you may not know it, but we talked about wartime, but the Army serves in many non-combat situations, emergencies, humanitarian. Soldiers have rescued families from hurricanes, delivered aid in floods, and protected communities from time and chaos. Service to the nation is not just battlefield-ridden, but the willingness to sacrifice for others is what an army or a veteran soldier gives. Christ himself taught us greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for a friend. These words remind us of sacrifice, not weakness. It's one of the highest expressions of love anyone can give. Soldiers who risk their lives for the person beside them step forward when others need help. The Spirit continues today. And why does that matter? Why is that important? Because this birthday is not just about history. It's not just about remembering who we are historically. It's about honoring the men and women that are serving and have carried it generation after generation, the sacrifices, the loss. What does a Blue Star family, what does a Gold Star family stand for? And right here in Texas, are you aware that we are the #1 veteran state in the country? 100,000 veterans moved to Texas a year over the last 7 years. And we're also the #1 women veteran state in the country. We also happen to be the #1 Gold Star veteran state in the country, and then the #1 Blue Star. So understand, we are leading the way, Texas, in service and identity because we have a willingness to serve, and we see the idea of our country greater and worthy of the sacrifice we have. Not only victory, but sacrifice. Not only history, but purpose. We celebrate the enduring truth of our nation. Those were people willing to fight for one another. And that's extraordinary to me. So to every soldier past or present, thank you. To every military family member present, thank you. To every veteran still finding its way to serve, thank you. And thank you to the United States Army, formed before the nation, forged through adversity, strengthened through sacrifice, and guided by faith, and sustained by generations who answer the call. Happy 251 birthday, Army. And may God continue to bless you and the United States of America. Thank you very much.